Good morning.
Yeah.
Legally ready to go.
Morning, Mr. Cunningham.
Yeah, we're good.
Okay, so we're going to go live in 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Good morning. I'll call the meeting of the National Board of Assessors to order at 9 a.m. on Thursday, February 3rd, 2012. Let the record show that present from the board are Robert Early. Mr. Bergeron is joining us remotely, and Mr. Bergeron, can you hear me?
I can.
Okay.
And for the record, I should probably mention that I am at the State House due to a conflict, which will require my presence at a meeting immediately after we are done. And at the present time, there's no one in the room with me. I am wearing a headphone, though, so that any conversations we have will remain private. And the mic allows me to cut out any background noise, should there be any.
Thank you. And myself, Daniel Hansberry, so all 3 members of the Board of Assessors are present either physically or remotely. Okay, the first order of business is the meeting minutes from the board meeting of January 20th. Is there a motion to waive the reading of the board minutes from January 20th, 2022, accept them and place them on file?
So moved.
Are there any errors or corrections? Seeing none, all those in favor?
Mr. Chairman?
Yes.
I'm sorry, because I'm participating remotely, you have to do all the votes by roll call.
Thank you very much. Okay, so I will call the roll. If you're in favor of accepting the minutes as presented, you will signify by saying yay. If you're opposed, you'll say nay. Mr. Early?
Yay.
Mr. Bergeron?
Yay.
Mr. Hansberry, yay. I guess you can say yes, actually, if you want to. Is there a motion to waive the reading of the non-public meeting minutes from the board meeting of January 20th, 2022, accept them and place them on file?
So moved.
Is there a second?
I'll second.
Okay, are there any errors or corrections? Seeing none, I will call the roll. Mr. Early?
Yes.
Mr. Bergeron?
Yes.
Mr. Hansberry, yes. Okay, motion is adopted. Mr. Vincent, do you have any comments for us relative to the department this morning?
No, I don't.
You do not. Okay. So the next item of business is an in-house correction that's going to be presented by Mr. Vincent. So, Mr. Vincent, the floor is yours.
Thank you. This property is a city-owned parcel on, it's either Sharon Ave or Sharon Ave, I'm not sure which way it's pronounced.
Sharon.
Sharon Ave. It was leased by a insurance company. They have not leased the property since, I believe, 2018. So the taxes that were issued for the tax years 2019, 2020, and 2021 need to be abated in the system. So this is an in-house correction to remove those taxes.
And have they actually paid the taxes, or?
No,
They have not
they're
paid the
outstanding.
taxes.
We found out after the fact that the tenant was no longer occupying the property.
Okay, so it's really just housekeeping.
Right, yeah.
All right. Are there any questions for Mr. Vincent?
Nope.
Okay. Is there a motion? A motion to approve the in-house correction for the property located at L. Sharon Ave,
So moved.
and that's account number 47474. Is there a second?
I'll second.
Okay, I will call the roll. Mr. Early?
Yes.
Mr. Bergeron?
Yes.
Mr. Hansberry, yes. The motion is adopted. Does that conclude your report, Mr. Vincent?
It does, thank you.
Thank you. So, unfinished business, there is none. This brings us to the public comment period. I would remind members of the public that there is a 5-minute limitation, and we ask that you display proper decorum when addressing the board. So is there anybody present that would like to address the board? If you can come forward, and if you would state your name and address for the record, please.
Sure. I just want to start my timer. Lori Ortolano, 41 Berkeley Street. A couple of things. Whoops. You folks had a presentation regarding the new market tax credit here, I think, at the last meeting, and I wasn't able to be available. But I wanted to point out that, one, I appreciate the comment by Bob Early and the confusion about how this really didn't make sense. What you indicated is exactly what Laura Calhoun has been saying, okay? And I hope you appreciate the complexity of what's been done here. It's really a sham for taxpayers who funded that. And two of you sat pretty quiet. Bob, you raised some good comments, not necessarily questions, but comments that have been, expressed by the public. Tim Cummings mentioned that we're going to, the company running the Art Center is going to pay the bills. We're paying rent for, $250,000 the first year, goes up to $500,000 the second year, and it increments up. We bought the building, we funded it, we built it, and we're paying rent. It's kind of absurd. These new market tax credits are not known to be the most clear methods or considered the most proper methods to obtain funding. And I wished we hadn't, because our alderman couldn't explain it to citizens, what was done. I have an email from an alderman who said, I don't understand it. I don't know how to explain it. My spouse and I are trying to figure it out. Well, when you vote as an alderman, vote no if you don't know this stuff, because it wasn't a good thing. I asked specific questions about the property for the Art Center and questioned whether the assessment was correct, because nobody did the April 1st assessment correctly. The building was a shell. It's still taxed at over $2 million, $2.5 million. I was told by Doug Dame in December when I checked into the assessing office that my questions would be answered. The holiday was coming up. It would take a little bit of time. I never got an answer on why that assessment wasn't done correctly. That was my question. I came to a Board of Assessors to address assessing issue. We got a new market tax credit overview, and I never got my questions answered. And I think my assessing questions were worthy of being answered. Let me switch over to legislation a little bit. I think there's a great opportunity to enact some legislation up at the state, and I hope Mr. Bergeron is listening, on these rental properties. We're about to reappraise these rental properties, and New Hampshire is the only New England state that doesn't allow or doesn't mandate that rental properties have to submit their financial statements as proof of income they're receiving. It's an honor system. With the high property taxes we're paying in New Hampshire, that should not be the case. And there have been articles after articles in the paper about how rental properties are being snatched up by income investors, in big investing companies. And in fact, at 30 Concord Street, there's an old apartment, 5 units, that is assessed around $400,000. It got purchased a couple months ago for $1.4 million by an institutional investor out of New Jersey. They don't have to show any income statements on that to us. And I think that hurts us as residential property owners. And I think that's the kind of legislation that our aldermen should be working on, to see to it that those justifications have to be provided when updates are done. I'm also very interested in seeing legislation change such that you can abate your property every year whenever you want, regardless of an update. Because cities like Nashua that push it off for 5 years and don't equalize disparaging properties stick people with bad assessments for 5 years because they don't handle their data correctly. Up at the Lakes region, my property is reassessed every year through an update. Every year I could contest my property value if I wanted through an abatement because a new update is produced. We're not doing that down here, and we're not equalizing our data well. The next legislation issue I think that needs to be addressed is the equalization ratio itself. That ratio is a combined commercial residential ratio. And I think the time has come to split that. You're going to have a ratio that's down around, 72% this year. Commercial properties didn't lose that kind of value. They get to apply those ratios to their abatements at the same level that residential properties do. And on the flip side, when you average that ratio, you're taking residential properties and you're preventing them from getting the correction they deserve because you're using the commercial data that didn't change much to set that ratio. And that is really a screw over to taxpayers. It's really not good. I know this has been discussed up at the state before, and I think the time is good. I actually just heard that they're doing some work on this. And I hope we split that and change that so we can have a better, a more fair shake when we reset these assessments. So those are some of the things I'm working on. I would have liked my questions answered. I'm going to file with the state on these questions I had. I don't think that property at the Art Center building was ever assessed correctly.
Thank you. I just want to respond to one of the comments. I had checked with assessing regarding the concern as to whether or not the building was a shell, and I was assured by assessing that it was not a shell. In fact, that somebody from the assessing department had been in there and had physically seen that it had not been gutted at that point.
I couldn't hear you.
I was just saying that I did follow up on that question that you raised relative to whether or not your statement was correct that the Performing Arts Center had been gutted as of that particular date. And I checked with assessing, and somebody in assessing had been in there. And as of that date, the building had not been gutted. It was not just a shell. I'm sorry. Is there anybody else?
And you wouldn't get back to me on that? Shame on you.
Is there any other member of the public who would care to address the board this morning that may be out there in cyberspace? Ms. Vino, is there anybody?
Laura Cajon.
Okay, if you could state your...
Laura Cajon.
Yeah, could you state your address for the record, please?
It's 30 Greenwood Drive.
All right, go.
It's ironic that the building was 30 Greenwood Drive. My name is Laura Cajon. It's funny that there is a article in the newspaper that on, I think, April 7th of 2021, the building came down totally. Now, if there was a fire in a residential home, the assessors would immediately go in there and adjust the taxes. However, on this performing arts, we did nothing. So the taxpayers are paying about $48,000 in property taxes on a building that came down, 6 days after, the deadline. I think that's ridiculous. And I think that the assessing department and the city of Nashua is screwing the Nashua residents by doing this. And that's all I want to say. Thank you.
Thank you. Is there anybody else out in cyberspace that would like to address the board? Ms. Vino, anybody else waiting? We can't hear you.
You're muted.
We have a Show A. Craig.
Oh, that's one of the staff assessors. It's Grant Schulze.
Okay.
So nobody else at this point then?
No.
All right, thank you. Okay, comments by board members?
Nope.
All right, so we need a non-public session. Is there a motion to go into non-public session for two reasons? First, to discuss matters which, if discussed in public, would likely affect adversely the reputation of any person other than a member of this board, unless such person requests an open meeting. This exemption shall extend to include any applications for assistance or tax abatement, a waiver of a fee, fine, or other levy, if based on inability to pay or poverty of the applicant pursuant to RSA 91-A:3, Roman numeral 2, parenthetical C. Second, under 91-A:3, Roman numeral 2, parenthetical L, for the consideration of legal advice provided by legal counsel either in writing or orally to one or more members of the public body, even where legal counsel is not present.
So moved.
Is there a second?
I'll second.
Okay, I will call the roll. Mr. Early?
Yes.
Mr. Bergeron?
Yes.
Mr. Hansberry, yes. Let the record show that we have entered non-public session at 9:14.
I will confirm that we are off the air and stop recording.
All right, thank you.
Yeah.
And at this time, I will recognize the legal department